But let me introduce Sarah to you. For those of you who don't know her, many do, because she's a very happening person in the world of social sciences. She's right now a professor, but also the head of Department of Sociology at a very, very young age, because she met all the requirements. She has started her journey, I think, in 2015 on a different campus. She completed her BSc Honours in Economics from London School of Economics and Political Science, London, and her MPhil and PhD in sociology from the Institute of Social and Cultural Universities from the University of Punjab. She has published 28 research papers in the areas of public health, social policy, is already the author of 2 books published by Oxford and Springers, respectively. She is now working on 2 intervention-based research projects and keeps her students involved in her programs for different research steps. She is also completing her online postdoctoral fellowship degree from the University of Oxford. How remarkable, Sarah. And she's also doing a lot of teaching and a lot of, I think you've worked a lot on the special needs children and social impact of coronavirus. And if I may add, you, I think, believe in cross-disciplinary, which qualitative research, is a key area where you can do that. And you do a lot of cross-disciplinary research. You join up hands with medical professionals or other professionals to bring together a very forceful combination of research. So we have now 100 participants with us. And Sarah, you can unmute and unvideo and take over. Thank you so much. What an honor to have you, Sarah. It's always a delight. We keep hearing about your, laurels on LinkedIn and other places, and you are invited to so many places to talk. So what an honor for us to have you.
Dr. Ruxana, and thank you so much for saying such kind words. And I'm honored as well to be here to share a little bit of my knowledge with everybody. A big welcome to all the participants from local and international universities. I just have a quick question. Can you see my slides in PowerPoint mode, and are they moving? That's excellent. Thank you so much. So this is a wonderful picture of my campus. For those of you who don't belong or haven't visited FCCU, this is one of the reasons why we're so inspired to do so much research. And we're very grateful to belong to this wonderful campus and all the wonderful colleagues. So I'm not going to take more time talking. I just want to launch into this, and how I've decided to split this is to cover majority of the talk will talk about what qualitative research is about, its limitations, its advantages, how to secure trustworthiness of qualitative data, and what are the different sampling techniques. But the second half is really focused on specific examples from my research. I'm lucky enough to have published now nearly 50 research papers of mixed methodology, joining qualitative and quantitative research. And in all 4 of my books, alhamdulillah, I've been able to present qualitative research through secondary analysis. So I'm going to share as much as I can a little bit of published work, because in previous seminars, we used to have questions back from registrants. Well, it's okay to do it, but how do you communicate, disseminate, and publish? So the examples that I'll be using in this session will all be from published work. And then the last section of the presentation will be about how I've used artificial intelligence, generative AI in qualitative research, and again, what its pros and cons are, because we want to make this session as contemporary as possible. So to start with our first slide, what's the definition of, and I'm just going to minimize this because all I can see is myself and Dr. Ruxana. All right, basic definitions. Qualitative research is basically a research strategy that emphasizes explanation and communication of words, hidden meanings, symbols, interpretations, voices of hidden populations. This is how we aim to collect data instead of collecting statistics, numbers, and compounded regression statistics to communicate to the world. As a realist researcher, we understand that both are important, both qualitative and quantitative research. And also, most scholars agree that sometimes qualitative research as a first step is very important before you actually go out and collect quantitative data, but that sometimes varies. Now, there is a complexity in basic definition of qualitative research, and there's sometimes unease in scholars because that's why they try to stick to the most basic and briefest definition, because qualitative research is ever evolving, it's dynamic. Qualitative researchers of contemporary times are changing and evolving the definition as they evolve data collection methods and analytical techniques. Now, some of the different qualitative research means are there's ethnography and participant observation. There's qualitative interviewing that is also possible with in mixed methods research, like you can have a closed-ended quantitative survey which has some open-ended qualitative questions as well. There are focus group discussions. There's also language-based approaches to collecting qualitative data, such as discourse analysis, conversation analysis, most recently, social media text analysis on Twitter for political participation and political preferences of people. And then finally, there's also the collection and qualitative analysis of texts and documents and biographies, etc. I'm not going to talk too much about the philosophical background and the difference between qualitative and quantitative research. I really like this summary onion approach. If you notice the outside onion and the layer, that's basically telling us that researchers' philosophical backgrounds guide them towards whether they will pursue qualitative versus quantitative research. So we know that positivists are hardcore social scientists who believe in numbers and statistics, and they usually take the quantitative route, whereas interpretivist researchers take on a qualitative route because they believe in deciphering hidden meanings. And then there's the middle ground, which is the realist researcher who believes in a combination of both the positivist and interpretivist philosophy and mixed methods research. Uh, at the end of the day, when you decide a qualitative research, you have to, the most important thing really is the research question. So you may even have a hardcore quantitative researcher, a positivist who believes in macro social sciences and hard numbers, but at the end of the day, they are compelled to collect qualitative research simply because of the question. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we want to understand how many physicians there are in the Pakistani public and the private sector. And we also want to understand what kind of social demographics characteristics those physicians belong to, what their ethnicity is, what their religious background is, what the gender breakdown is. So automatically we're going to have to approach it in a quantitative manner because we're trying to gather numbers. Versus, we might have research questions where we want to understand the experiences of physicians working in Pakistani hospitals. We also want to understand the challenges facing different physicians based on their social demographic characteristics, i.e., do women coming from rural areas, from ethnic minorities, as physicians, face challenges compared to urban male Punjabi physicians from Pakistan? Now, here we will obviously have to collect qualitative data. So at the end of the day, the research question matters, the study focus matters, the significance of the study and what you're trying to prove or what policy you're trying to mobilize, that can also determine your qualitative research as opposed to just the philosophical background of the researcher. Now, there are different types of qualitative research methods. We won't go into detail, but these are the four big ones. Interviews, we also call them IDIs, in-depth interviews. This involves just the researcher and the participant. You're asking questions, you're listening as a researcher, you have permission to take recordings so that you can do more in-depth analysis and you don't miss any information. The interview may be guided based on a structured and very structured questionnaire, and I'll be sharing an example of this in upcoming slides. Or it may be semi-structured and unstructured so that you can get as much data as possible. This is one of the benefits of qualitative research. You might go in asking specific questions about corporal punishment within the household, but you may realize finding themes related to child labor and related to employment of young minors and the workplace violence that they're facing from employers. So you went in thinking, I'm going to find a lot of data about parental violence, but you found out about employer violence, which you didn't imagine was facing the child population. Then there's also focus group discussions, which is an interactive session with a group small enough for everyone, usually not more than 5 to 6 members, because it becomes arduous for the researcher then to manage and then allow all the participants to speak and have a voice. There's also participant observation. We'll be reviewing a checklist that I prepared and published a study related to. It's a little bit more complicated than IDIs and FGDs. It requires a lot more work, and it also requires a team of researchers to work together. And then there's also document-based qualitative data, which is a selection of relevant documents, let's say historical narrations about Quaid-e-Azam and how his journey was in leading us towards independence. So a little bit about a question that usually people have, the difference between deductive and inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is associated with quantitative research, but inductive reasoning is associated with qualitative research. And with deductive reasoning, what happens is that we do literature review, we decide a hypothesis, a statement of prediction, and then we go into the field to prove it. Is it right? Is it wrong? I.e., we have a hypothesis that women who have experienced violence will have urinary tract infection problems as adults. And so we go in, collect data to prove whether that hypothesis is correct or incorrect. Now with qualitative data, it's a little bit, it's the opposite. We may do a literature review, and in the next slide, we'll see we may have a working hypothesis, but we do not go into the field to test that hypothesis. We use a literature review to develop our research questions. We select the sample area and the population group. We collect data. And then these little arrows that you see, you can also imagine them in a circular flow. We start interpreting data as we collect data. So let's say we've conducted 2-3 interviews, and in the night we sit and start reading the transcripts, and we decide to go in and collect a little bit more data, maybe from another site. Through network sampling, we approach another population group, because from the first 3 interviews, we realized that we need to sample people from an elderly population bracket. We may also define in that purple box over here on the right to refine our questions further or add questions to our semi-structured questionnaire. And this is the benefit of qualitative research, that you don't have to have a closed-ended survey and then you've gone and collected data from 1,000 people and then you've come back and realized, well, I wish I had added that question to the survey. Qualitative process is inductive, it's interpretive, it's cyclical, and it gives you the benefit of refining and improving your questions while you're collecting data. And then obviously the last leg is writing up your findings and recommending conclusions for the betterment of society. So something that classical qualitative researchers used to stay away from. They used to believe that qualitative research and the word hypothesis are completely apart from each other, and this is not true. In qualitative research, there is hypothesis generation in the sense that we use literature review to decide our research questions, and then we do grounded theory methods, which is questioning rather than measuring, and generating hypotheses using theoretical codes. Because with qualitative research, what happens is that we go collect data and then we generate theories and hypotheses. And so this is also known as non-testable hypothesis, i.e. working hypothesis. It allows qualitative researchers to go in with specific questions to collect data, but they're not aiming to test the hypothesis or prove them correct or incorrect. We are basically, as qualitative researchers, in a broad horizon where we're welcoming as much data as possible and we're not predicting anything as we go into the field, which allows us to gather a lot of rich data. Another very big benefit of qualitative research is reflexivity. This entails recognizing that biases exist in a researcher. They may become so researchers with qualitative research might go into the field, they might become native to the population. Once they do, they obviously develop attachments, affiliations, and then that may influence their data collection process and also their data analysis. But because we're very aware of this reflexivity problem, we as qualitative researchers, we constantly remind ourselves, and we will be covering a checklist in upcoming slides, where we constantly remind ourselves to question our own taken for granted assumptions about the cultural context, the political context, the economic realities, and the feelings of people. So, based on literature review, if you've decided that this population group has these feelings, and I as a researcher have been working them for 4 or 5 years, we still prompt ourselves to be as reflexive as possible and be open to new feelings and ideas. For example, one generation to another might have different challenges, different experiences, and different interpretations. So this is a wonderful cycle by Pitter that summarizes reflexive thinking. uh, you're having interviews with participants, and then you're asking yourself, what were you thinking and feeling at the time as a researcher? So it's not just about the participants' feelings, but your feelings as a researcher. And then you acknowledge that baggage, that bias, the possibility of conflict of interest, discrimination, and then you take measures to mitigate it as much as possible. You reevaluate your findings. And then we will be covering trustworthiness and qualitative research. You turn towards member check, peer check, and through reflexive insights, you go back into interviews with a non-biased approach. You may even choose to have more researchers. That's one aspect of reflexivity, where, for example, if I'm a Shia and I'm collecting data from the Hazara Shias, I actually did this. I made a conscious effort to pull in researchers with me who were not from the same religious or ethnic background, so that I wouldn't, my interpretation of data and my data collection would not be biased, which was only natural. So these are a summary of, we're about to conclude our first section of the presentation. These are a summary of the pros and the cons of qualitative research. The benefits are that it provides us in-depth understanding. It helps us to explore complex issues, which is not possible through quantitative and closed-ended surveys. It helps to generate theories and hypotheses. There's possibility of triangulation of data collection methods through IDIs, in-depth interviews, FGTs, participant observation, etc., and documentary analysis. And then there's flexibility and adaptability. There are obviously limitations. There's the possibility of researcher subjectivity or bias. Sometimes the data, because there's qualitative data is always much lesser compared to quantitative data. So maximum you might be able to interview from between 5 to 50 people, again, depending on the time and the resources that you have. With quantitative data, you can collect data from the whole country. So sometimes qualitative data is not generalizable. It also takes much more time and energy. So with quantitative data now, you can collect it online and you can have 1,000 surveys filled within 5 days. It's absolutely impossible to interview 1,000 people, and qualitative researchers will not even think about that. So lot more time, a lot more energy, a lot more intensive work is required, especially for data analysis process, where you're reading and rereading transcripts. And whereas with quantitative research, you can enter the data and have a lot of findings pushed to you within seconds. And that's not possible even with qualitative research software. So it's also hard to repeat and replicate. And then there's also lack of numerical data, which means that it's very difficult to disseminate. You'll notice at conferences that people who are presenting quantitative researchers, they have graphs and statistics and numbers and bar charts, and they've made their point. But whereas qualitative researchers are talking a lot, and their presentation slides are a lot of quotes, and people lose drift. So you have to also engage your audience, and dissemination tactics are very complex as well for qualitative research, but obviously they have their benefits as well. So what about trustworthiness? There is this myth or illusion that quantitative research is valid, it's reliable, and you can't ensure validity of qualitative research. This is not true. Qualitative research has 5 aspects of trustworthiness. There's credibility. This is respondent validation and triangulation, where you generate your findings and you share them back with your participants, asking them for their approval, their feedback, if you've missed anything at all. Then there's transferability. This is the use of thick description and rich details, gathering a lot of data. This is the process of, let's say you've conducted an interview for 1.5 hours. You may give the participant a break, but you will encourage them to have another session with you maybe 1 week from now, because because you believe that they haven't shared enough information. This also helps in transferability of findings to other milieu or other contexts. So let's say you've collected data from physicians in Punjab, but you would also want to collect some data from physicians in Sindh or physicians in Balochistan to be able to generalize these results back to to all of Pakistan and different provinces, which have, because of devolution, have different healthcare policies as well. Then there's dependability. You can assure this through the auditing approach by ensuring that you have a saved audio recording, photos, interview transcripts, and data analysis, decision making, and also independent data analysis from three different research team members. Finally, there's confirmability. This is personal values or theoretical inclinations of the researcher, which we should not allow to sway or determine the process of research and also the data analysis or the findings presentation. This is possible by checking and rechecking your data. Again, like I mentioned, having 2, 3 independent researchers analyzing the data, and then presenting themes, and then having meetings to decide or agree on final themes. Documentation of clear coding or those tree branches that we present in qualitative publications, and then also inter-rater reliability or peer check, having seniors and other people. This is a process that is continuous. So for example, when you're presenting a qualitative research proposal, you can have peer check, you can have institution review board check, you can have your department and your co-workers, your seniors. But then also, while your data collection is going on, if you have funding, for example, your funding body will be asking for audit reports. At that point, you can secure both dependability and confirmability by sharing back recordings, photos, interview transcripts, clear coding of your initial data analysis. And then finally, when your finding is there, when you've decided that these are our findings, this is what the research team has decided, again, you can share that those findings or those themes, the whole project back with your seniors, your peers for approval. So this is how trustworthiness in qualitative research is possible. The different types of data analysis technique in qualitative research. There's content analysis, the first one, the most common one. That's the most common one I'll be talking about first and last, and the rest of them in between. So content analysis focuses on analyzing data by categorizing, coding, and quantifying specific words. You assign codes to different segments of the data of the text. You can do this manually. You can do it through a software like NVivo. We'll try to cover NVivo quickly. I'm trying to space the time as well. And it can be used, content analysis can be used to analyze IDIs, FGDs, newspaper articles, social media posts, any kind of qualitative data, really. Then there's narrative analysis. Now, this unfortunately or fortunately can only be used for specific things because it focuses on interpreting and understanding the stories and personal narratives shared by individuals. So researchers, what they tend to do through narrative analysis is they start analyzing the structure and the content and the meanings of the narratives. So let's say we have a lot of narrations by cancer survivors. And by examining those narratives, we're able to identify common themes. Those may be coping strategies, survival techniques, who their support networks are, and what their personal growth was like for preparation of end of life, etc. One of my studies has focused on this, but I won't be able to present it today. But I'm happy to share it if participants email back. It's anyway open access, but so that you don't have to look for it, you can email me or email Gohar, please. Then there's discourse analysis. This examines the social, cultural, and power relations that shape language use in different contexts. Again, you can use discourse analysis to analyze interviews, speeches, media articles, and conversations. However, its focus is on the way in which language constructs and reflects social realities. This is why a lot of people in humanities tend to use discourse analysis. There's also grounded theory. This is particular to qualitative analysis. Some people may argue that all qualitative analysis generates grounded theory. The aim over here is to develop theories, concepts from the data as it emerges. It's an iterative process, it's cyclical, and it's inductive, which we covered in the previous slide as well. And the final, most common, widely used like content analysis is thematic analysis. This method involves identifying, analyzing, and reporting patterns or themes within the data. It's usually also done manually and with software or conjointly. Researchers and more experienced researchers tend to never abandon the manual approach, which I also recommend. Don't just use the software, don't just use AI, generative AI, do the manual coding, thematic analysis as well. And I've also used thematic analysis the most in my research compared to the other methods. So what kind of sampling types can there be? There can be typical case sampling in qualitative research. This is when you are sampling a case because it exemplifies a dimension of interest for your research area. So for example, I want to understand the experiences of free patients versus paying ones through the Sehat Sahulat program. And so I will specifically go and sample patients who accessed free services from a private sector hospital through the Sehat Sahulat program. Similarly, snowball sampling in qualitative research is also a type of purposive sampling where you sample through a network of participants. So let's say you want to sample 20, your target is to sample 20 female doctors. So you've accessed 3 female doctors, but you don't know how to approach the rest of them. And so you ask the existing 3 doctors for their networks and for their suggestions, and you access populations through that snowballing approach. There's also extreme or deviant case sampling. This is usually used in sociology and criminology, where you are trying to sample unusual population groups like the transgender community or juvenile prisoners. Then there's maximum variation sampling. This is when a lot of qualitative researchers are compelled to opt for this because they're trying to generalize their findings as much as possible. In a country like Pakistan, which is very pluralistic, there are a lot of different ethnicities, people from different rural backgrounds, from different provinces. We have to target maximum variation sampling, where we try to gather as much data from different population groups or different stratas in society or the region. Then there's theoretical sampling. This is it's a little bit like maximum variation sampling, where you continue to sample until you reach theoretical saturation. You've crossed 20 interviews, but because you're analyzing them on a daily basis, you find that each interview is still giving you new information. And so you target theoretical saturation and say that we will only stop sampling when the new participants are not giving us any new information. So that concludes the first part of our presentation, and I'm going to now talk about specific examples. Obviously, Gohar and CLT team will share this presentation with you. All the reference material is attached, and my referenced articles are also available online. But if you have any questions, please let me know. It's very difficult to take out chunks of your own work and share them for the sake of knowledge. So I apologize if I'm rushing through this, but because we have only an hour. Now, I'm going to give you an example of
May I start, Sarah, would
yeah.
you like to take questions now and then sort of move on to your
I
examples, perhaps?
no, I would cover the examples and generative AI. Otherwise, we won't have time, and some people might have to leave at 12 o'clock.
Okay.
Is
And
that
so when
okay?
we take the questions, yeah, but we would like,
So yeah, so should I stop? It's 11:30. Should I stop in 15 minutes? So by
yeah,
11:45, we can take questions.
absolutely. I think that's
Excellent, excellent. So this is an example of an open-ended questionnaire developed. It was used for IDIs, and then also it was reformed for FGDs. You'll notice over here that the demographic information that I'm collecting from participants includes their codes, their genders, their age groups, and the current occupations. Now this varies depending on your research design. This was a study that we were doing to conduct analysis of the experiences of students during the COVID and what their problems and challenges were for online learning. So there are 4 questions. The first is, during the COVID-19, what were the problems and challenges faced by students? So I want you to imagine that in an FGD, if we have 6 students and all 6 of them are going to talk at the same time, how you're going to manage that, because you want to give everybody equal time and an equal voice as well. I'll jump to the third question, which also has a prompt, which is very important in qualitative research. And this is why pilot testing and then member checks or peer check is very important, because this is where people will say, well, I don't understand your question. Please develop prompts or give examples. So the third question is, what do you think can be done to avoid the problems if we need to shift to online teaching? Prompt example, if there's another pandemic, if there's regional instability, if there's disability and physical access issues. Um, and then the last question is basically something that will give us strength to develop recommendations for our study. This is a very good open-ended question, which most qualitative research questionnaires should end with. What, if any, role can state and educational organizations play in supporting online or hybrid teaching? And this is where we're prompting the students to give as many recommendations as they can. Now, what we need to recognize when we're planning both IDIs and FGDs being a little bit more complex and tiresome to coordinate, is the timing, the venue, the hosting of the group, gatekeeping access, private places, but securing the participants. Let's say you have a vulnerable group like mothers who are domestic violence victims. So we would want to also support their children with daycare while we're interviewing them. This is where money and funding is involved. Observers and co-moderators, a team of researchers with you or your research assistants, one who's doing the recording, one who's managing the quality of equipment, one who may be taking notes, one who may be even recording a participant observation checklist. This is a little example of how in contemporary times qualitative research is presented. In the past, qualitative researchers used to get frightened. They were like, why are you quoting numbers? But now when you're presenting your research to your editors, immediately they will ask you, where are the numbers? So they're not disassociated with each other. You can see here, this is a publication of mine from 2020 about women microfinance health borrowers. I've presented themes in the first column, and then sub themes or categories and subcategories. And then I've also mentioned the frequencies and percentages, just to give an idea to the audience and the reader about how many people are arguing for a certain problem. Let's just pick one. So 87.8% people, the last one, are arguing that they face health delivery system issues related specifically to shortages in resources at public health centers. And this also, so one of the qualitative quotes that is associated with this and presented in the research says that when we go the first time, we don't find resources. The second time we don't go because we don't have trust in the healthcare delivery system. So again, this is just a similar example. This is an example of manual coding. So what I've done is that based on the first column, and by the way, this data can then be compared with NVivo produced data and generative AI produced data, which I'm just going to show you. But I will always recommend that manual coding has to be done first. So what I've done is that I've picked out in the first column important quotes or highlights from participants. So let's say a participant says, I cannot access healthcare because the healthcare center is very far away. So I've coded it C001 and I've written far away from the health center. And then I've added this under a group theme of access, and at a second stage groups theme to access to health center. And then once I start doing this with others, I've also started color coding that, oh, C001 and C007 belong to the same group of theme, etc. And that's basically how manual coding is done. It's time, it takes your intelligence, it takes your critical thinking, it takes your time. So this is something that you can't skip. It's not like quantitative research where you've got the data, you just enter it into SPSS and give some commands. A lot of your effort is involved over here. I have to share this. So there's no way to jump this. This is an example of a participant observation tool that we developed. So with much of qualitative research, its strength is in triangulation, not only having ideas and FGDs, but also participant observation. This is because non-verbal communication of the participant is extremely important. So a study that I did, an intervention with old age people in their homes, was about intergenerational learning with the youth. And we developed a participant observation tool over a period of a year where we added 7 positive emotions and 7 negative emotions. And we asked our intervention facilitators to then start ticking and crossing while the intervention was taking place. And based on these ticks and crosses and a lot of papers for at least 10 other interventions, we were able to assign numbers. So wherever there was a tick for a positive information, we obviously gave it a 1. And then we collected all that information and we summed the positive information, summed the negative emotions, and we, based on the final value, we were able to determine, assigned a cutoff of 60, and we were able to determine that anybody above the value of 60 had positive association or affiliation with an intervention. Let's say I1 was an intervention of talking about civic education. And at that point, we realized that this is an intervention that elderly people find beneficial for their quality of life. And so remember, with participant observation, again, deciding what kind of observations and non-verbal communication you want to measure is important. Then deciding the scorecard is important. And like the previous slide says, this is a unique way that has to be developed by the researchers. It also takes time and energy, but you're not alone. You can also have a lot of peer check and pilot testing to ensure that the participant observation tool meets your targets for achieving your research questions. I'm not going to take much long longer, but I wanted to share that Elsevier has a wonderful checklist for qualitative submissions. This checklist should be used before you prepare your proposal, before you send it for funding, and also before you go into the data collection site. It has different domains, i.e. what you need to ensure for the research team and reflexivity, what you need to ensure for study design, what you need to ensure for analysis and findings. And this checklist should be with you all the time from day one, because it's going to help you in the end publish a reputable and trustworthy project. Finally, this is NVivo. I'm going to skip NVivo, and because that should be a separate session altogether, unless Dr. Roxana, you want me to cover NVivo. So I'm just going to cover this slide, which is the preparation for data for manual coding, NVivo, or generative AI. This is how you take your audios and transcribe your data. And remember, before you want to send it into a software like NVivo, you need to have consistency. So each interview code or each interview transcript and each of its questions have to be in the same order. This is how I've prepared. This is how I always prepare my files. This is also ready for manual coding, for NVivo, and also for putting into an AI site like ChatGPT. So in NVivo, you can have the benefits of summary type, tabs, hierarchy charts, tree maps, sunburst. You can also ask and prompt NVivo to create notes for you and generate frequently captured words and themes. But you can also create notes beforehand in NVivo and then ask them to confirm. So the benefit of using a software after manual coding, obviously, is that it gives you a little, instead of a peer helping you for iterator reliability or trustworthiness, you have a software supporting you, confirming themes. Maybe they'll give you some more themes that you've overlooked. And this is also, so this is a slide on publication tips. I'm going to skip this as well because you'll be receiving this presentation. This is my last section. I have 5 minutes to cover this. This is a little bit about generative AI. And its benefits in qualitative research. So we know that generative AI can yield us a lot of literature review. We can give it structured questions and prompts to help us in collecting a comprehensive literature review. I still would recommend that you go through your search databases. Let's say you're working in the area of public health, so go into PubMed, go into Google Scholar, go into Elsevier for social sciences and cross-disciplinary social science medical research. You'll find a lot of data, but then go into ChatGPT and see what it's giving you as well. Now, what I did is that I used ChatGPT for a publication that was published in 2021. This was a rapid publication during the coronavirus. It aimed to understand the challenges facing operation department practitioners in Pakistan who are an allied health resource, but they are sort of marginalized professional group. They have faced compensation issues. They face other issues related to stigmatization in the workplace and problems related to hierarchical order as well. So now some of the themes and sub-themes that what I've done is that I've attached another summary of themes and sub-themes just to give everybody as much diversity as possible and to make them recognize that we can do all kinds of qualitative research, can answer all kinds of questions and help us in areas of investigation. The sub-themes and sub-themes that I've presented are from a study about family member experiences of COVID-19. So this is something that was done. So as an exercise, what I did is that I went into ChatGPT and I asked them, and I'm just going to give you a reminder that this is what my transcripts look like. So I have transcripts saved from 2021, 2022 of the data that I analyzed. I also have the published themes in an impact factor journal. Now I'm trying to test what ChatGPT is going to do for me and what its benefits are in data analysis, not literature review. Again, that would be another session altogether. So I write to ChatGPT a command saying, please generate common themes from the following qualitative transcripts. And ChatGPT replies, sure, I'd be happy to help generate common themes from qualitative transcripts. Please provide the transcripts you'd like me to analyze. So what I do is that I paste these transcripts. There are about 18 interviews, and I paste them into the next command in ChatGPT, and you can see them pasted over here. And ChatGPT generates these themes for me, these 7 themes: social stigma and isolation, emotional and mental health strain, practical and daily life challenges, health system challenges, coping mechanism, community and family dynamics, precautionary measures, and cleanliness. Now, two other things. You can also refine your search in ChatGPT, and that takes some experience where you can say that please give me broad themes and give me some specific sub themes and also the related quotes supporting those sub themes. And so ChatGPT will give you a little bit more of a detailed answer. But simultaneously, please, I want you to juxtapose and see what I had done already and published, what my manual analysis looked like, and what I had published. And under that, you can see three areas: stigma, struggle, strengths, because the benefit that an individual researcher has over ChatGPT is that I'm critically thinking about my research questions specifically, and I'm presenting sub themes and collapsing them in an order for my, because I'm more cognizant of my audience. So there's a huge difference. And that is why there are benefits to ChatGPT and generative AI. I myself am using predictive AI in a research project to predict fetal abnormalities, and that's very valuable. So we shouldn't run away from AI. But generative AI, more than predictive AI, there are some concerns. And I'll talk about the concerns first. Because the model is based on because they are based on statistical patterns in large amounts of data, rather than on expert knowledge of a research and critical analysis, you may have inaccurate theme development, unreliable information, unnecessary themes that you might not want to include in your final dissemination. Then you may use them in writing literature reviews, and this can cause researchers to lose their independence and their thought process and their critical thinking skills. Like I just mentioned, use it for literature review, but do go back to your Google search engines and your academic search engines and do a repeat literature review. There's also issues of integrity and honesty with, it's not just students, but maybe a lot of instructors, and I'm sorry to say this, who may start passing off AI as their own work because we have data detection tool issues at the moment. And then there's also the problem that a lot of people, researchers are finding cumbersome, is that has AI actually just added to our work? We need to do it manually, we need to do it through AI, we need to do it through software, and that just means more time. And we have to take much more responsibility to ensure that when there's AI generated information, when we insert and extract and start using it, it should not sway away from the goals of qualitative study. Having said that, there are definitely benefits. You've just noticed on this previous slide that it's allowing me to reconfirm my manual generated themes. Stigma is there, struggles is there in coping and in daily life challenges, strengths are there in coping mechanisms. So I feel really confident. Suddenly AI is helping and me not only in literature review, but also in additional categories and themes beyond my initial findings. I may even refine this search further, give more specific command to ChatGPT, and then also produce another paper on community and family dynamics and precautionary measures and cleanliness, which I hadn't included in the first publication. So there's also the benefit of increased reliability, as generative AI can support a challenge challenge a researcher's coding analysis. Sometimes you will always find that your peers want to help you, your seniors want to help you, but they don't have the time or they don't have that much time. And this is where AI can come in and actually be a great partner for you. So these are my references. I have all the reading material attached in a zip folder, and Gohar will share that with you. And as promised, I've finished on time. So over to Dr. Ruxana for questions, please.
Sarah, two requests. I first,
Yeah.
before we answer questions, I think a lot of information was very dense. And I suddenly realized that this session perhaps should have had a longer duration. And we should have discussed it in detail because there's a lot of information. And I know that this is not necessarily for first timers. We want participants to be aware of what is qualitative research and to add on to their, this is not for first time researchers for sure. But there were very good points. And if most of you are okay with it, we will continue the session till you are satisfied with some of the questions that are coming along. So is that okay with you, Sarah, if, people would like to revisit some stuff? Okay.
Yes.
We'll start with some questions, and those questions There was one comment also, and I think it's worth exploring, that please share the slides with us beforehand so that we are aware of the pace. The pace was very fast, and I totally agree there. So, but it's our fault. Perhaps we should have kept a longer duration. Dinah put in lots of questions. She's the first one that she said is, and we'll take them in the order that questions were placed. How is qualitative research hypothesis stated?
How is it?
How is it stated? How do you write a hypothesis for a qualitative research?
Oh,
And I would have said it's no different to any hypothesis that you would write for any research. But if you would please answer that.
yeah. No, what happens is that in qualitative research, you will find in some publications, especially contemporary qualitative researchers, they add a subsection called non-testable working hypothesis. They refer back to the literature, because in qualitative research, when you're doing a literature review, you don't say, I'm only going to take qualitative research papers. You've got quantitative research papers. Quantitative research papers conclude with a hypothesis, and your literature review has to be very comprehensive. And at that point, qualitative researchers will include it in their introduction, their literature review, maybe the significance of research. And then when they're writing their methodology or their aim of their study, they will put it under working hypothesis, i.e., working on non-testable hypothesis, that this is a hypothesis that quantitative researchers have predicted. We are cognizant of it. We will include it in our research questions and our analysis, and when we are going to collect data, but we will not go out to, but when we are collecting data, we will not try to prove that it is right or wrong. So in quantitative research, we use a hypothesis to predict an outcome. In qualitative research, we may quote a hypothesis generated by other researchers, but our aim is not to prove it or test it in the field. That's it. And a lot
Hmm.
of qualitative
Yeah.
researchers still, and a lot of qualitative researchers still, like I'm thinking of Dr. Julie Flowerday, they will not even go near the word. They will purposely not even include it in their literature review. But that's the
Yeah.
complexity of qualitative research. It's ever evolving. You have to move with the times, and everybody wants to have a very comprehensive literature review. So quoting hypothesis is very important as well.
So we'll move on to the next one. We had a Zoom glitch, sorry, Sarah, in between, and we were not able to take in more than 100. And so we were trying to resolve that. University of Punjab, Mohammed Sabeen, being not generalizable and replicable, can we question the scientific nature of qualitative research? And I said, yes, of course, it's questionable if it's not
No,
generalizable. But there are some case studies that you would limit to only the area. Yes, Sarah.
no, I don't agree with this. This is a common myth about qualitative research. It's listed as
Okay, good
as a
to know.
limitation. It's listed as a limitation commonly, and this has
Yeah.
just been going on since 50 years. But the truth is that qualitative research, by its aims to, for example, collect data about, let's say, I'll tell you, the transgender community in urban Lahore. Now,
Hmm.
when I say the transgender community's challenges and coping strategies in urban Lahore, the finding is generalizable to that community. So there
Hmm.
can be credibility through respondent validation. There can be transferability through use of thick description. There can be dependability through the auditing approach. There can be confirmability through inter-rater or peer check reliability. So it's generalizable, but it may not be generalizable to the transgender community living in London or the transgender community living in Sindh. And that is just a reality. It's not a limitation. It's just a reality because human nature varies. This is
Hmm.
also true of quantitative data. Let's say I've collected quantitative data of the transgender community in Lahore, but it's not valid next year because next year maybe a bill has changed, or suddenly they've been allowed to gain. Nadra is accepting them and giving them identity cards. So the data that I collected about them not having SARS status through the NADRA, that data is old now. But we don't call it ungeneralizable in quantitative research. We usually criticize qualitative research and it's not fair. It's,
Hmm.
it's it's simply, you can't generalize it, but that doesn't mean that it's a limitation. That just means that the data has been generated for a specific population at a specific time, and it's valuable for that time.
Yeah. What I
Yeah.
would say actually is that it is generalizable to the variables that you have set up to state your context. And so within those variables, it's generalizable, and beyond those, it isn't. That's about simple as that. Because you've stated your
That's about.
parameters in your research. And those parameters, it just depends that given these parameters and variables, this is how it is. So we go on to the next one. uh, what sampling size is appropriate for qualitative research, and how is it calculation for a population? So that is again Diana. G.
Okay, so you can see over here that because of the diversity of qualitative research, let's say I have an open-ended, semi-structured questionnaire, and my target at that point is to ask about 8 questions from a population, and then also return to them for questions. Maximum I would be able to given, and then I only have 3 months. During that 3-month period, so see how all the context applies, what kind of questionnaire there is, how many questions there are, what, how much time I want from the participant, and how much time I have for the research. Now I'm talking about graduate scholars who are doing their MPhil. They only have 3 months maximum. They will be able to sample 20-25 people. If it's an ethnographic researcher who wants to live with the population and they have a set time of 5 years, question at the end of a quantitative, you can see here gathered quantitative data from 442 participants. Now, this is not a 1 hour, one, it depends on the research design, the type of questionnaire, how much time the researcher has, and what kind of questions they are. Is it like a 6-page questionnaire, or is it like 3 small questions which has open-ended lines where people are giving qualitative answers and you can analyze it much faster
Yeah.
and gather more data.
But
Yeah.
Sarah always thought,
And if you read,
yeah, sorry.
sorry, I wanted to say that if you read a typical qualitative journal and you scroll down, and I have an article where I published a qualitative article with 6 participants, and then I've published a qualitative article with 442 participants. And it's the same when you scroll through a qualitative journal, one of the, like, let's say Sage's qualitative journal. Again, you will not find any limitations now. You will find a qualitative paper published with 3 participants because of the population type. They wanted to interview politicians who were privy to decision making for the Vietnam War. So they could only find 3, and that's valid. But and then you'll find qualitative research with around 400 participants as well.
But Sarah, when you say this depends on the population. When you're saying that they interviewed 3, that means 3 is the only population number, and so they
Yeah.
no. If you say that they found 3 in a certain area, and they
Yes.
were doing the research in that area, and there was only 3 people that fit in those specifications, then that's the total population of that specific area.
Yes.
So when they do 3, they're actually covering the whole population. It's not a sample. So in my mind, I always thought that depending on the population, a sample size still made sense to justify. See, please correct me if I'm wrong, because for me,
This is
it
true.
was always that, yeah,
This
it's
is
the
true.
population.
That's the whole reason why you will never find any qualitative research book which is telling you this sample is enough.
Yeah, I agree.
You will
It's
not have
according to the
sample
population.
calculation. Yeah, with quantitative research, you straight in go into a sample
Yeah,
Taro Yamani formula. With qualitative research, you will first look at the population group and the research questions and the
yeah,
type of question and the how much time, and then also other contingencies like how much time you have, how much money you have, etc. Which
yeah.
which are realities. Yeah.
Yeah, so Amna Zahoor from GC, Government College, University, I wouldn't know where F. How do you find results with the help of qualitative hypothesis? Now, I did not really understand that question. I am sorry.
So
So,
I think the question is this. So basically, once you've collected your qualitative data, you can either choose content analysis, narrative analysis, thematic analysis, discourse analysis, and then there's the
methodology.
ontology as well. These are the
Okay.
five major approaches.
Approaches. Okay. Diana, again, could you emphasize on the thematic analysis and the one after content analysis?
Yes.
You have used thematic analysis a lot, so that she just wants a different, how do you go ahead with that?
Well, what happens with thematic analysis is that we've collected qualitative data. Let's say we have 20 transcripts from female women doctors. And what
Yeah.
we do is that we start reading them to analyze and identify different themes. Let's say when we read the first transcript, the theme that is coming up, we've collected one theme. We've identified one theme, which is she's married and she's having problems at the home, and that is why she can't put in her best at the workplace. Let's say we comes and we've identified that, we've colored it yellow, we've highlighted it, we move to the second, and in the second interview now, because it depends on the participant, we identify five themes. Not only have we confirmed the theme above, that their workplace work conflict challenges, but there are four additional themes. One may be related to employer harassment, third related to hierarchy and leadership. So
Hmm.
the trick to thematic analysis is reading and identifying themes. Human nature and the human brain is such that the more you read, the more themes will start coming at you. And the beauty of qualitative research is it doesn't care about numbers. So if I have 20 interviews and 20 people are saying one theme, that theme is as important as one participant projecting one theme. And I will present as a qualitative researcher, I will present all these themes.
Hmm. So great.
But the key really is time and reading and rereading. And if you have the benefit, have another team member doing independent thematic analysis. So when both of you come together, you do it independently. When both of you come together, maybe one has 50 themes and another has 55 themes, five extra themes, which the first one didn't think of. And then post that, you can do thematic analysis through the software NVivo, and you can also do it through generative AI.
Yeah.
That's your choice.
I think that was very helpful. And you're right, doing two or more people doing it independently of each other and coming together to discuss is a brilliant idea. Muhammad Irfan from Karachi Medical University, how can one validate their interview questions except pilot study? And again, I'm sorry, I'm lost. What
Yes.
was?
So the way to, when you first, let's say you've decided, you've got a research proposal, you've got institutional review board, ethics approval, your department has approved it, you've got 2, 3 team members, they're very happy. You go in with your qualitative questionnaire and you do pilot testing with, let's say, 3 participants. Your target overall is to interview 20 people, but remember, the people that you interview in your pilot, you cannot include them in your final sample. And based on your pilot, what will happen is that when you come back, based on your pilot test, you'll notice, well, question number 5, the participant didn't understand. I need to edit it, rephrase it, understand it better. You may also understand other issues. Like, for example, you're interviewing women microfinance borrowers outside the women microfinance office or in a private room inside the office, and you realize that they're still not talking. So you've decided that now you will ask them for a place at a local dhaba or a local vending stall, which will give you a little charpai space, and you can also feed them, and their children can also be playing around over there. Your research assistants can help. That actually, in some cases, through a pilot test, is a better gathering. It's more independent. It's public, but still more private, where they're not in their home, they're not in the microfinance office, and so they're going to share a lot of information. So this is the benefit of a pilot test, where it's going to tell you how to refine your questions, how to refine your settings, how to approach people, how many more research assistants you need, and whether your audio machine equipment is working properly or not. And this also contributes.
Excellent. I didn't. Yeah,
I think that's the question, because
please.
yeah, I think that was the question, Dr. Ruxana. So I'm trying my best. But yes, pilot testing
Excellent.
basically
I did not realize. Yeah,
Pilot testing basically gives you better data in the end, in your final data collection process. So it's
yeah.
part of the trustworthiness of data. Sorry, I'm on the wrong slide actually.
But I never realized that it also helped you in putting up an environment where you would feel better, and the pilot would show that where you can get better responses. I think that was brilliant. Never came to my mind. NUM's Saira Khalid has the same as pilot study, suitable for a qualitative study as a dry run, and I think she just answered that question. Slides
Brilliant.
should be shared, Diana. Yes, the presenter is so fast. Yes, unfortunately, we were constrained because of the time. Taskeen asked, could you share any good reference articles on types of translation of verbatums and their writing in our thesis from regional language to English?
Okay, so for
Uh,
that, my recommendation for publication tips and looking for journals and looking for articles is to use HJRS. These are the sites.
hmm.
You would have to do a little bit of that homework yourself.
Yeah, I think so. That's the best way to go because every discipline and every area will need. Um, uh, do we use feedback? Do we use feedback form for non-verbal analyses?
Yes, here's an example. The participant observation checklist tool, I'm sorry that you can't see this very clearly, is that there's a little open box right at the end. Something has opened in front of my screen. Oh, the
Yeah,
code,
please,
sorry.
Gohar,
Yeah.
will you close it?
Right. So so this little box will give us feedback, and there's a flip side to it. This goes with the intervention facilitator who is gathering participant observation information. Not only are they going to do ticks and cross, but for each observation and behavior, there's a comment box, and then underneath there's a note box, and there's also a feedback form for the participants. This is very important. You can in online survey, online qualitative research, sometimes you can actually mail them and ask for their online feedback, because sometimes what happens is that they're in a better position to give you your feedback afterwards, 1 hour later, 1 day later. It should be their preference. And that feedback or staying in touch with them will also help you later on with your member check, the member check and trustworthiness of the data. So that's highly recommended. It's always a part of qualitative research.
Uh, there's a lot of good discussion between Diana and Zaira Mahmood about NVivo. Of course, NVivo, they are saying, is it free? How long does the trial help? And so
Yes.
on. And I
Okay.
think, yeah.
NVivo, yeah, NVivo. I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this online, but we use pirated SPSS and NVivo. There
Don't
is a
say,
trial. So
Sarah.
sorry, I'm sorry about this. So what happens is that when our students come into our qualitative research MPhil class or undergraduate class, we first train them on NVivo, and then we ask them to when they're ready to start working on it, we tell them to do it turn by turn. I'm sorry, I'm sharing the tips, the realistic tips for us in Pakistan. So let's say it's a class of 6 students. We will tell the first one to download the 15-day trial version, and all of them will work together. And then we'll tell the second one to download the trial version, and then there are also ways to access the pirated version, sorry to say.
Oh
Maybe we
my
shouldn't
God.
say it online.
Yeah, I know. We don't
Yes.
encourage that, but because of the expense which we are unable to do, there's a lot of things that do happen, and we are not very proud of that. Can we generate themes before starting interviews, or
Yes.
interviews just based on developed questions?
Yes,
Some,
for NVivo, yes. That is why manual coding is very important, because
yes.
NVivo has two options. NVivo will actually allow you to create nodes first. Nodes are themes. So let's say through manual coding, you've derived 6 themes and you enter those nodes in NVivo. And then NVivo will start collapsing quotes and information under those theme at that theme or that node. But NVivo works the other way as well. You can plug in that, this transcript data that I just showed you, which you can just plug this into NVivo, transfer that file in. Here's the tab. You can transfer that file in. NVivo will start reading it, and it will also generate frequencies and nodes or themes for you. It will recommend them for you, and then you can match them back with your manual finding. Please don't use software or generative AI alone without manual reasoning and manual thematic deduction, because you might find something that they haven't found, the software hasn't found, the software might find something that you haven't found. You might find a quote that can be collapsed under a theme, etc., etc. You understand my point. Next question, please.
Okay. Diana, again, would you say that the difference between quantitative hypothesis and qualitative hypothesis is um, uh, that qualitative generates hypotheses on questions, while quantitative generates hypotheses on literature?
No, yes, quantitative research, when you do the literature review before data collection, states a hypothesis. And then in quantitative research, you go and test that hypothesis during data collection. So what
Yeah.
happens is that in the methodology, you report a hypothesis based on literature review in quantitative research. Now stop there. Qualitative research quotes hypothesis in literature review, but does not go in to collect data to prove or disprove that hypothesis. It only uses it as information purpose, as a non-testable hypothesis. Right?
Okay, great. Again, something new for me. Another approach, and that is a very Vakar, you really know your research models perhaps. Another approach for theme generation is LDA doping modeling and generating dendrograms using either Python or R language. Now we are going into hard area. What do you say,
No,
Sarah?
this is not associated with qualitative research, but I think what you're trying to talk about is that in Python and R, through quantitative surveys, there may be open-ended questions. Let's say the PDHS is asked, if the PDHS isn't doing it, but the recommendation for the Pakistan Demographic Health Survey or DHS survey, which is collected worldwide, is to add some qualitative questions, i.e. ask the woman, if you are facing violence in the, I'm just giving an example, if you are facing domestic violence, tell us who it is, because we are just assuming it could be the father, father-in-law, husband, the mother, mother-in-law. Maybe it's somebody else, a relative who comes. So we're trying to gather qualitative data. For example, the woman might say, this person who's seasonally relative, an uncle who comes every 3 months, for 3 months in a year, they are doing it. Now we can't, the quantitative research was not able to identify that population group, so we're hoping qualitative research. So sometimes qualitative open-ended questions are added into quantitative questions, and then Python or R or SPSS can actually just give you frequencies that
Hmm.
out of 10,000 Pakistani women who were sampled through the PDHS, 5,000 said they experienced domestic violence, and 80% of them experienced it from their husband, but 1% also indicated it was a brother-in-law that visited once a year during Eid or holidays, and they
Hmm.
also imposed violence upon them. So they were, yes, statistical software like Python, SPSS, R has the ability to give you frequencies related to qualitative research. And I've actually generated these frequencies from SPSS. So the
Hmm.
themes I have in the middle category, the first and the two columns, these themes have been generated by manual coding, but the frequencies have been generated through SPSS.
Hmm. Okay. There are lots of questions of NVivo. People want a session on it, but I
Yes.
think that is another will PowerPoint we provided. Yes. Excellent session and very comprehensive. Dr. Sarah Jaffrey seems to have an excellent command. There's so much. Yeah, absolutely. I'm listening to her and I'm saying I never learned research. If we have a separate dedicated webinar on qualitative research designs, and what is the strategy to include, exclude variety of comments from participants into different themes, and how do we discuss the results? I thought you talked
Uh,
about themes and perhaps, yeah.
what I what I always do, because everybody, please pray for our professors who passed away. They're in the next world waiting for us. When Dr. Mohammed Hafiz, who was my supervisor in MPhil and PhD, he said that there is no quality. He was a qualitative research expert. He used to say there is no qualitative theme that you will find that is not relevant, that is not important. You might not want to share it now, so keep a separate folder, keep a separate file, and put those themes over there. And this is what I will share with everybody. There is no such theme. So, for example, I'm presenting challenges and coping strategies of the Hazara Shia community, but I found a theme related to girls not getting married after their fathers die and their own community abandoning them. It's not fitting in under challenges of because my challenges was only supposed to be related to economic and education, and this is a marriage challenge or social
mm,
behavior,
mm,
uh,
mm,
something. So I've put it aside, and maybe based on that, putting that theme aside, I will be able to generate another research question and another project altogether. So don't, no theme is useless. The theme that is
mm,
identified which you don't want to present because it doesn't really fall under your research questions and objectives, just put it aside in another file and come back to it a few months or a few years later. There's
mm.
no such thing as a bad theme or an irrelevant theme.
Yeah. Would you state a theory again, Diana, for qualitative research and work towards it, or will you finalize your work to find out a theory? Okay.
No, qualitative research by definition, and when you practice it, is true as well. It's iterative. It's circular. You have a questionnaire, you go and collect data from two people, you start analyzing the findings in the night. And that's very important for a qualitative researcher. It's also part of the flexibility, the reflexivity, all the advantages that we quote of qualitative research. You see this little circle. So when you collect data, you start interpreting and you go and collect further data. You might then change or modify or improve your research questionnaire as well. So once your theories and your concepts are emerging, there's no limit to how many concepts and theories that may
Mm,
emerge. You may again have the reality is that you may have certain amount of time and certain amount of months. So you say, I haven't reached theoretical saturation, but I'm desperate to get my PhD degree. I'm stopping over here. I may come back to it in the future. And these are our realities. But otherwise, some qualitative researchers, the ones who've passed, they've done all their degrees, you'll notice that they're collecting qualitative data for 8 to 9 years, and you're asking them why. And they're suffering as well because they keep saying, well, we go back, one theory is emerging, one concept, one domain, sorry, we don't use the word domain in qualitative research, but concepts and theories are emerging, and
mm,
I've not reached saturation. So it goes on and on in a circular process. This is where, I mean, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you just exhausted all the theory or the concepts that can emerge. Let's say you're interviewing special needs mothers and the problems and the challenges that they're facing for their children, and you've got certain domains and sorry, concepts that are emerging, or thematic areas related to health,
mm,
society and stigma, related to husband and family support, and then that's it. So sometimes you may go back into the field and it's iterative, and the theories you the themes you are definitive, and sometimes saturation is reached, sometimes it isn't. It depends on the project, it depends on the data, it depends on the population group, and it depends on
mm,
how much access you have. Let's say I'm not able to sample any more mothers of special needs children, and then that's a blockage in itself. So sometimes it's not the theory, but rather it's a population group that has stopped prevented you.
mm.
Next question, please.
Yeah. There are a lot of factors, absolutely. What, again, Sahibal Zaira, what biases can affect the responses during focus group discussions or one to one interviews, and how to address such biases when analyzing data and doing
Uh,
further writing?
I'll tell you an interesting thing. We never recommend FGDs for our undergraduate students because when you put a group of 5, 6 people together, let's say you just put students together and you start asking them about the challenges they face in the classroom related to their peers, related to their teacher, related to the IT, related to administration, you'll find that one participant, and in this case it's a student, is talking about the other, may start fighting with each other, may start arguing with each other, and your questionnaire is gone. So really, the FGD the researcher who's conducting the FGD has to be experienced. They have to be non-biased. They have to have command. They have to be able to steer the conversation, make sure that everybody is speaking their turns. And FGDs are the most complex and difficult process. Participant observation takes more preparation, but is still easier. IDIs are still easier because there's one-to-one. As you know, people change their behavior from IDIs to FGDs. You will also notice that if you interview somebody in an IDI and then put them in an FGD, they change. It's human nature. They were very nice and polite, let's say in an IDR, and then in the FGD, you notice things about them that are prone to conflict and prone to bias. And then you, as a researcher, have your biases. You'll notice. I'll share honestly with you that when I'm conducting FGDs, I lean towards the girls. I lean towards the females, especially if it's a younger population group like female students, because I think that they'll help me a little bit more. They'll keep quiet, just they'll understand my expressions. They'll understand the need for space or giving another person time. And this is a bias. This is a bias. Not all girls are like this either. But really, every FGD is different. It depends on the participants, it depends on the researcher, but you have to go very prepared. Some tips. I have a presentation that I do for my MPhil students on how to conduct FGDs. One tip is really to keep breaking the ice and keep motivating people and saying, thank you so much. We have only 5 minutes to cover this first question. There are five of us. If you, all of you have 1 minute each, please. And you have to do it in a very polite manner and keep steering them, but you have to be prepared. So if you go prepared as a researcher, unprepared for your FGD, you have the questions but you haven't done a dummy test or haven't done a pilot test, you can do it with your friends or your family, then you're going to be in trouble. You'll notice that your first three FGDs were useless. You haven't gotten anything. You've wasted your time. So a lot of
Excellent.
preparation. By the way, I have a wonderful FGD. I don't know whether I pasted it over here, but I have a wonderful FGD checklist. Time of day, day of week, time of year, number of groups, all of this matters. The heat, the season, whether you're bringing drinks for your participants, the type of establishment, the noise factor, the building, the location, physical arrangements, etc. Next
Yeah.
question, please.
Yeah. There's so many thank yous and so many compliments from so many. Saima and Afshi, absolutely correct. A wonderful session. And Saira Khalid, thank you for us of University of Karachi. Excellent, but we need more time. Yes, Samson from Orek, Harun, we do. Wonderful, enlightening, Rubab, insightful session, Ikra. What is general sample size in a focus group research? Insightful
Not
session. Yeah. Okay.
not more than 5 to 6. Luckily for us, there is a parameter for FGDs, not more than 5 or 6.
Okay. Oh,
And
I
you'll
thought that, you could go up to 10, in a focus group discussion.
you
No.
can, but with social sciences, you'll find that even when you're sending them to even with medical sciences, when you're sending that to a publisher, they're going to argue with you and they're going to say, well, how did you sell? How much time was it? How did people say? So if you start telling them
Oh,
we had an FGD for 4 hours with 10 people and every person had this much average minutes to speak, they won't believe you that you were able to keep people in a room for 4 hours.
oh,
So
wow. What
not
an
so
interesting.
be safe, be very safe, because afterwards answering these questions is very difficult. People will not believe that they will believe that out of those 10 people, five were quiet during that 1.5 hour.
Okay.
Because you cannot
Absolutely.
sustain the participants for more than maximum 2 hours. You can't sustain their attention. Yeah.
Uh, would you share some resources for these different areas of, case study, focus group discussion, some other where you could find some idea of guidelines or checklist for each? Because
I,
these are
I
all,
Yeah, for that, like you can use a qualitative research book, but I have a summary of all the checklists as well. I can mail them to the participants. But
please.
all the main qualitative research books like Brime, I think I've attached one of the books to the zip folder as well. They have the
Okay.
checklist.
Okay, great. I think that's a great idea. Productive session, yes, Hassan. Diana, in that case, do you have to prove your sample size and sampling calculation to support it?
We don't
That
use sampling. Yeah, we don't use sampling calculations in qualitative research. We go by which population we are studying, how much access we have, what gatekeeping issues there are, what is the time that we have to collect data, and what kind of questionnaire we're using. Is it a two-page questionnaire with 20 questions versus it's a small questionnaire with two, three questions? So I'll give
Hmm.
you an example. One of my students, Tereem Sajjad, she was able to sample more participants for body modification and ear piercing post her. So for her thesis, she had only 1 month to collect data, so she was able to sample only 6 participants. Later on she wanted to publish the research, so and then she had till December, from August to December. So she went and collected another 12 responses. She had a two-page questionnaire. So see, it depends. It's only when you do it, then you'll understand.
Can you have this time lag between, two segments of the same thing? I mean, there
Yeah.
must be a certain time limit to what you can do for the qualitative research. You cannot add, after some time and
Yes.
say this
So,
is a
so
part
this
of the same.
Right. So the selection criteria matters. So let's say the selection criteria is currently enrolled university students
Yeah.
who have engaged in body modification in ear piercing. So when you write your thesis, you'll write, I collected data in July, and then I had to start analyzing the data in August. And then when you're publishing your research paper and you're submitting it in December, you will write, I collected 6 interviews in July and another 8 interviews from August to November. Selection criteria was the same. Currently
Okay.
enrolled university students who had engaged in body piercing and modification. Here,
Okay.
obviously, your right time will matter. For example, if you're interviewing people who were studying online during COVID, but you can't access them now. And so then so again, the study, the research question, and the sampling selection criteria matters.
Lots of saying in chat that it was a very, needed more time and too much information for beginners. What at Diana? At what instant do we present qualitative data in word cloud?
You can,
At
if it's prepared and transcribed, well, I don't know much about which software you're talking about,
Docker,
but
yes.
I'll just tell you that I learned to prepare data like this, and this is acceptable in all softwares, even generative AI.
Hmm.
This is the best way to have your demographic information on top in red. You can color code your questions in green, and I had 7 questions, and then your
Hmm.
answers in black font.
Hmm.
And then each transcript is pasted or recorded, transcribed in the same manner. So the
Hmm.
next one would be interview code 2, and then the same information, just the black text would be changed and the red text.
Hmm.
And this is now ready to be plugged into any software for analysis.
Hmm.
And this should be done every night. So if you've done 2 interviews in the morning, you should start transcribing in the evening, and also may have your hard copy for manual thematic generation. Because only then will you realize whether you're reaching thematic saturation or whether some of your questions need to be modified, etc.
Hmm. Okay. Uh, This is true, lots of information. But Monica from Morocco, amazing session, extremely articulate, practical, and knowledgeable. You are an inspiration. But a lot of other people, participants, have said that for us as first timers, it was a lot of information to take in and a very fast pace. What type of observation works with the checklist, participant or not participant? I would actually, such questions, I think, would be very easy to Google or to even look up on different sites. I think the sort of questions that Diana you are asking, but Sarah, do you have time to sort of works?
What
What type of observation works with the checklist? I mean, you need a checklist, participant or
Okay,
non-participant.
that again depends on your study population.
Yeah.
So you can see this checklist over here has been targeted for a population group, old age people. And what was the aim? The aim was to deliver an intergenerational learning activity. So for example, one of the activities was civic engagement and
Hmm.
asking and another one was community building and character building, and a third one was understanding their political and past historical ideas and ideologies. So this is what the elders were talking to the youngsters about. So this checklist then obviously is framed for them. Now let's say I have another population group, and that's surgeons operating in the surgical unit. So my checklist will be different. Are they nervous? The negative emotions would be nervousness, fast-paced, rushed, irritated with their, the nurses or the operation department practitioners. And the positive emotions may be calm, in control, satisfied, these type of things. So it depends. You have to, with participant observation, that's why people stay away from it, because I wouldn't say young researchers shouldn't do it. We should all try, but participant observation takes a lot of time. You have to understand your study group, You have to understand, you have to do initial observation before you develop your observation checklist, and then also do with peer check, you have to develop a scoring mechanism so that you can actually quantify the results and be able to explain whether what the results of the participant observation were. And it depends on the population group.
Okay, if I'm doing a qualitative study, now this is going too much into a consultation on oral health in children with Down syndrome. What will be the sampling technique? I think it depends again on the population and the variables.
No, the sampling technique over here would be typical case sampling. It would be
Yeah,
typical because it's a very specific group.
the
There you
group.
go.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but depends on what group are you picking up from where again. The context, is it in a in a in a
Absolutely.
in a in a home where they're taken care of, or is it in your community, what community, and so on. And I think that's how you would think about it. Convenience sampling or purposive sampling, yes, I think that was an answer from Zaira Mamoor
Yeah,
Sahiba.
typical case sampling is purposive sampling, but the realities of qualitative research is, let's say, let's make it simple. You've quoted Down syndrome. A population with Down syndrome can be accessed in two ways by researchers, because we have ethics and we have a lot of limitations. Either through the basic health units that have records of Down syndrome students, children, or through tertiary care hospitals, and then again you would need permission from them. And then at second level, they would give you access to information to the parents, and then you would either call them,
Hmm.
or if they have a ward or your unit that is specifically serving these clients through the month, you would have to sit there and wait for them to come for their consultancy, and then ask them if they would be interested in being in the population. So at that point, you can use a mixture of two things: typical case sampling, where you've approached the hospital has told you that these are our consultancy dates. They will be visiting us at these times. You can come and approach them and ask them for permission. And then you can ask that family if they're part of another support group, they know anybody else, so that you can also adopt snowball sampling. Both.
Hmm.
That's why it's never good just to say
I
purposive
think
convenience. You would be doing both, yeah. And most of us use both. Most of us use two, three together.
there are lots of other small questions that I think are very, very basic, and they should come with a basic understanding of when you start research. I'm not very sure if we have time to address them. How would you name using interview analysis to support user statistics of a library system? And I am sorry, I don't know if you understand what it is. Uh, how can we use qualitative research in the domain of computer science? Why not? But anyway, I think these are very basic, some sort of questions. Do you feel you want to continue with this? Sarah, there's some more, 12 or 13. I don't know what are they. I haven't gone through all of them. Or would you,
Dr.
that we stop here, sort of take.
Yeah, Dr. Ruksan, it's entirely, yeah. No, it's entirely up to you, but I just want to mention to everybody that in one session for qualitative research, we've covered basic domains that a basic introduction to qualitative research textbook has recommended to us. That's Bryman. But apart from that, we had to cover all of these elements, and we can't leave anything out because previous registered participants have been commenting and giving their feedback. And in fact, pre-session, they used to ask for questions. So we've included all of that. But I agree that this presentation can be shared before the session. It's going to be shared now, and the reading material is also with us. And I'm happy to answer questions. And this is my email address. And if there's
Hmm.
anything else that Dr.
I think we have taken away a lot of feedback from your comments, and we are very mindful that things perhaps could be done in a slightly different manner. And we will
Agree.
try to sort of increase the time and also try to tell you what will be covered and what will not be covered, that's so that you are aware that this is where we will move what will. About the session, about on NVivo, we would be very happy to consider it. There are lots of things coming out of these comments. Let us put it this way. We are collecting all the comments, and we will put up again a subset to this research course and put up those sessions that you have suggested and open them out again to all of you. I think that's the best we can do for now, but this was meant to sort of be a session just to kickstart our idea about what are different areas in a research methodology that we need to know. But of course, there's a lot. I'm listening to you, Sarah, and I am flummoxed because my research information is now over 20 years old. I used to teach research methodology, but a lot that you speak from experience is remarkable and unmatched. And I think that I haven't seen another expert as good as you, if I may say so. So thank you so much for your time. And we have the polling on. Please, if you would kindly, click it. At one point, we had 180 plus participants, but even now we have 150 with us. Thank you so much for bearing it for all that time. Yes, we have another session at 1 o'clock about quantitative research, and this is Mr. Zishan, Dr. Zishan from Hull University, UK. So we'll be joining you again after a short while. Combined session on quantitative and qualitative, addressing data triangulation, mixed explanatory, exploratory, and may also be essential. This is more like going into complete course in detail, but we will think about it. We did start with a few sessions, Sarah, some years ago, and our